Hey, hockey fans, TBOS is 13-3 here with another top shelf guest, Minneapolis native, former Golden Gopher, Pittsburgh Penguin, and Phoenix Coyote, Joe Dziedzic. This episode is sponsored by Riverside Bike and Skate, Hertel Law, Kelly Heating and Electric, and Ryan Flagg at State Farm Insurance, along with Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, which has been committed to the healthcare needs of patients in Western Wisconsin since 1954. The orthopedic surgeons and athletic trainers serve many area schools in the Chippewa Valley of Wisconsin. Mogi.
Hey, we are thrilled to have Joe Dziedzic with us today, former Mr. Minnesota hockey in 1990, goes back a couple years, but we're going to talk about that. And thanks so much to our host, Tom Reed, who's letting us set up here in his Hockey City pub. We're going to hear what Joe has to say today. Welcome, Joe.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I've heard your show a few times and pretty impressed with your client list. You've got some pretty big names over the last, 2 years?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here and share some stories.
All right.
Cool. Well, you're one of the top on that list then,
Absolutely.
too.
Absolutely.
I don't know about that.
Well, let's start up. Before the mics were turned on, we talked a little bit about your past. And you grew up in Northeast Minneapolis, followed your father at Edison High School. Were you an all-around athlete like your dad?
Yeah, I think it was just kind of in our DNA as far as athletics. My dad was a big believer in athletics. He never forced us into anything, but he strongly encouraged us to play different sports, try different things, and see which ones you liked, which ones you didn't like. And, so having 5 older brothers and sisters, they were all involved in sports. And so I was either tagged along to go to games or practices and just kind of looked up to those guys watching their games and was hoping that, can't wait to get my turn and play some games. And it was just something that was instilled in our family. We had a kind of a small little neighborhood in Northeast where everybody would end up at our house, and we'd always play touch football games, or we'd play pickup basketball games, or we would play street hockey games. And it just seemed like our house was where the action was.
So speaking of your family, 3 boys and 3 girls. So what was it like living in that household?
It was crowded. It was very crowded. A lot of battles going on. And I look back at it now that I've got my own kids, and there's a couple of battles here, right, with the kids. And I look back and I wonder, how did my mom and dad do it with, just the sibling rivalry of everybody trying to, eat more food or be the first in line for the bathroom or be the first in line to get the best seat in the car ride. It was a never ending battle. And, man, it must have stressed out my parents.
One of those statements, the dads used to say, if I have to stop this car.
Yeah, I've found myself saying that a few times. Flashback.
Yeah. Parents always wish what they're doing to them on their kids happen with their kids. Yeah. A lot of pro athletes have come out of the Minneapolis area. Did you have any pro athletes or NHL athletes that you looked up to when you were growing up?
Not really. To me, it was maybe because of my older brothers and sisters. It was, the high school level. I was, kind of infatuated with just the guys that were on the high school varsity football team or the hockey team. And then as I got older, it kind of shifted to the Gophers and watching the Gopher football team and Gopher hockey team. And I remember we'd get into the Mariucci Arena and we'd go down on the corners where the roof over, hanging from the basketball side. Yep. And just remember the character that building had and watching there being right up on the glass. And it just seemed like the guys were bigger than life and just thinking, man, I want to be out there someday. I want to do what they're doing. And I was lucky enough to do that, years down the road. But I think those games in that rink, watching that you'd buy that general admission ticket and you just kind of work your way into the glass. And that made a big impact on my life as a hockey player.
So when did you start playing hockey? And were your other family members hockey players?
They were, like I said, hockey wasn't like the big sport. I mean, it was whatever time of year it was kind of like, if it was fall, it was, you're in football and like, that's all that mattered. It was football. And then you moved to the winter, and I had one brother that played basketball, and me and my other brother, Tim, were more focused on hockey. But then once the snow melted and the spring came, it was baseball time. And my dad was a former minor league baseball player. And so that was kind of his passion, was baseball. And it just seemed like it was more of a seasonal thing. It wasn't like I wasn't playing hockey year round, I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
So
what's your thoughts? I mean, you played professional level. You are a coach yourself now. Do you like it when kids play multiple sports?
I do a lot. I can tell, even like coaching high school now, that I can tell when I have a football player on the hockey team, because they're not afraid of contact. They have that drive to get to the net or finish checks. And it's almost like it's second nature to them. Whereas there's kids that I've coached that maybe if they would have played football, they wouldn't be so tentative by the boards or in front of the net or to engage in contact, because they're kind of timid, and maybe in the back of their mind, they're thinking, well, I don't want to get hurt, And if you played football, you can't avoid contact. It's part of the game, every play. And I've always said, like, if there's a football player, I'll find him on the ice, because it's just evident that kid's tough. He plays football.
Yep, he's going to be in the mix.
He's going to be in the mix. And so I do wish kids played more multiple sports, but it seems like, the way things are going these days, that kids are playing 12 months of the year. Are they more skilled? For sure. But there's something missing too. If you can't pick up a baseball bat or a golf club and swing it, because it just feels like, well, I've never done this before. And so I think there's something said to kids that do other sports and try different things. Plus, you get a fresh look, and you meet new friends, right?
You have your,
and you get exposed to different coaches too, different adult mentors,
which is huge.
Yeah, I agree with that. So when you were growing up and playing hockey as a youth player, was it playground hockey still at that point, or was it association?
It was association, but we also had like an outdoor, a couple parks by my house. So I'd play in a park board league, and, more than anything, I just remember playing at Wyndham Park with different age guys. So there could be some high school guys down there. There could be some Bantam middle school age kids. There could be some college guys that didn't even play like on a team, but just, older guys that would play. And we just seemed to figure it out. It wasn't like so structured. It wasn't so, there wasn't any parents around watching. It was just go play. And sometimes you got thumped, and sometimes you did okay. But it was kind of like, you just figured things out and played. And it was just a different time. And I think maybe it was just a sign of the times back then, where, I would walk to the park, a couple hours, play, walk home, have lunch, go back. There's just a lot of the same guys there, and we just keep playing. And then, the ice would get so bad, you'd had to shovel it a few times, but that was all part of the deal.
Yeah.
That was your weightlifting for the day.
Weightlifting for the day.
And power skating.
And power skating all in one.
You had a terrific high school career, culminating with the Mr. Hockey Award. When did colleges start taking notice to you?
Probably right before that. Probably when I was a Bantam. We had a Bantam team that went to state tournament. I put up a lot of goals that year. That was probably the year I thought maybe college hockey could be in my future. Was my second year of Bantams. We went to state tournament up in Eveleth. We had a good team. We had a couple of guys. Our goalie went to Division I, Derek Karlovsky, went to BU, won a national championship there. So we had some kids that could play. And I remember my Bantam coach was, saying, "Hey, we're getting some interest. We're hearing, some guys are coming to watch, and just keep working hard, keep playing. You never know who's there watching." And so when I got to high school, I was already kind of thinking, I want to keep playing after high school, and I want to have that mindset of, I think I could play somewhere after high school, and we'll see how it goes.
And play you did. So many high school players seem to be going the junior route after high school. Was that an option for you at the time, or not so much?
Back then, it was more like it just seemed like the way it worked was the better players went right to college, and it was the guys that maybe needed another development year playing junior hockey to figure things out, maybe to get a little stronger, maybe just to get a little quicker, and then they'd go to college. Where now it's like the opposite. Most kids are going junior hockey for a year, maybe 2 years. You'd still get every once in a while a kid that goes, a really high end player that might go right to the university and then maybe spends a year there, and then boom, he's in the NHL.
Kind of like Logan Cooley.
Yep. Or if you remember, Middlestat from the Gophers,
Casey 1 year.
Yep, one and done. But it just seemed like now it's different too, because you got the whole thing with the transfer portal. Guys can leave if things aren't working out, and it's just a different game, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
You talked about as a kid going to the Gophers games, looking up to those guys. When colleges started to looking at you, did you have your fingers crossed that one of those colleges was going to be Minnesota?
I was hoping, just because that's where I mean, deep in my heart, that's where I wanted to go.
Every Minnesota boy did.
Everybody, yep. And so I was right there. I'm like, hey, if these guys come calling, I'm going there. But I had other schools, Wisconsin. I went and visited. I visited Duluth. I visited Colorado College. But funny story, I was recruited a lot to play Division I football, and so I was getting letters and phone calls from all the coaches in the Big Ten. Michigan, USC, UCLA, Arizona State.
Wow.
And I had a true story. I had already committed to play hockey for University of Minnesota, and I get called to the principal's office on a class. And I went down there and you called for me? And he's like, yeah, there's a guy from Stanford here that wants to talk to you. He's down in the lunchroom. So I go down there and he's got this big spread of Stanford football. And he didn't know that I already committed to play hockey at Minnesota. And he had this thing, and he was going to give me this big spiel of, hey, this is what we can do, and come visit us. And I said, hey, thanks, but I'm going to go play college hockey. And he said, why would you play college hockey? He says, what do you guys get for fans? I said, Mariucci holds about 7,000. He says, well, our arena holds about 85,000. And I said, yeah, but I'd rather be, a bigger hockey player than just a, regular sized football player. And I just, hockey practice is a lot more fun than football practice.
Games are fun. No doubt about that. Yeah. No doubt about that. So your freshman year at the Gophers, you played in 20 games. You scored 6 goals. You had 4 assists. So what was the most surprising thing to you going from high school to the Gophers in college?
Well, I think it was a good lesson to be learned that I had to earn ice time. It wasn't just going to be given to you. There was a lot of good players there in front of me that were older. And I think, I was kind of maybe a bigger fish in a smaller pond in Minneapolis playing hockey. And so when I get to the U of M, I had to learn to, fight to get in the lineup. And I think that was something that I had never had to deal with before. I was always the biggest, strongest, kid on the team. And I get to the U of M, and it was a learning lesson to be like, hey, you're going to have to improve on some things and take it up a notch. And I had to learn about different things about practicing and just how to approach the game. And so that year was probably the most meaningful year in my development as far as learning what it takes to be a Division I hockey player.
For our listeners, we haven't really talked about this yet. What position did you play, and how did you choose that position?
Well, I was a left wing or center in high school. And then when I got to Minnesota, it was just, basically I was a left wing, and I stayed left wing throughout my pro career. I guess I didn't like defense for some reason. I always wanted to be the guy going to score the goals and trying to score versus a defender. But I don't really know. I just ended up there and just stayed there basically my whole career. So yeah.
And you're happy with that position?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I got to ask, as a defenseman, and Mogi's a forward, did you play the forward position maybe because you couldn't skate backwards?
Probably in the beginning, right? Because you don't have to work on backward skating if you're playing forward the whole time. But I tell guys now, as a Pee Wee coach, as a youth coach, and a high school coach, that if you can start off at D and get the backward skating down, it's much easier to go from D to forward than, later on say, hey, now you go back and play D, and you're backward skating. Maybe your confidence isn't there, and you got to learn some things. And I think it's good just for kids to get different perspectives, right? If you're a defenseman, you see the game differently from behind than if you're up front. And I think it's just something that kids should do. They should switch around and play different positions.
So you played with the Gophers for a couple of years. When did it start to sink into you that you could possibly have a professional hockey career?
Well, I was drafted out of high school at Pittsburgh, but when I got to the U and I had to go through some playing time issues and just kind of figure things out. And then I had a couple injuries there that were unfortunate. All hockey players get hurt. It's just a matter of when. And so I busted my arm twice my senior year.
Ooh.
So it was the first week in Colorado College. I got checked, innocent check, went into the boards, had a fractured wrist. Came back from that up in North Dakota. We were playing, and about an inch away from So I've got a titanium plate. It's about 7 inches right here with about 8 screws in it. And that was the end of my college career there. And so bittersweet end. Our team went to the Final Four that year, and it was at the old Civic Center downtown St. Paul. And I was close to coming back to playing, but the doctors just basically said, "Hey, it's we can see in the X-ray it's still broke. You can't play.
Yeah, not worth the risk.
It's not worth the risk." And so that was hard to take, watching the team, and we didn't win the Final Four that year, but it was just a bittersweet time. I'm glad for our team to get there. Not very happy that I wasn't able to play. And then I was lucky I didn't, because I was still in training camp in Pittsburgh, the next fall, and I could still feel like my shot wasn't where it needed to be. Like I still felt some weakness in that arm, and it wasn't until probably halfway through that year where I started to feel like I could shoot the puck, and I wasn't worried about my arm anymore. So,
what skill set did the Gopher see, and then eventually the NHL see, that you brought that they wanted?
Well, I would say number one is you got to be able to skate. And I think a bigger guy, I was 6'3", about 225, and I could skate. I wasn't the fastest guy, but I wasn't slow either. And I think just the emphasis on skating and being aggressive and being someone that, could still make plays. But I think I learned from being, a Mr. Hockey to fighting for the lineup in college, to get in the lineup and play and get confidence and get to the NHL. And be like, hey, you're going to be a third or fourth line guy that's going to have to play physical. You're going to have to be an energy guy that's going to finish hits, and you're going to be a guy that's going to block shots and do those type of things. And we'll leave the scoring to guys like Mario and Jagr. So pretty smart move by the coach.
Not a bad move.
Yeah.
So you get drafted by Pittsburgh, and I got to tell you, I love your Pittsburgh Pirates hat. Have you been a fan since then?
Well,
Were you
that
a
was
fan
part
before?
of it. When I was in Pitt, we always looking for things to do, and so we'd go to the games and get to meet some of the players on the Pirates. And they used to have that old Three River Stadium, which was kind of not a very nice, kind of like the Metrodome. It didn't have much character, but it was what they had there for the longest time. And now they got a sweet ballpark there. Is it Heinz Field, or is that the football? I can't remember, but really cool. And you got the view of downtown, the bridges there. It's a really, really cool stadium. So if you ever get there, go check out a game. It's definitely worth it. Yeah.
All right, cool.
We've interviewed guys who have been drafted. Some guys went to the draft. Some guys didn't even know that they had been drafted. They get the phone call and their mom tells them they've been drafted or
No
whatever.
cell phones back in those days.
Yeah.
That was me.
That's our question.
Yeah. So I kind of knew, I've been talking to the teams in different interviews, and, I was ranked anywhere from the first round to the fourth round. And back then the draft in 90 was in Vancouver, and I was playing summer league baseball at the time, and never even occurred to me like that we should fly out there and see what happens at the draft. And so I remember getting a phone call from Pittsburgh scout John Gill and said, "Hey, congratulations, you've been drafted by the Penguins." And funny story, rewind real quick, is that I think it was my older sister that answered the phone, and said, she's yelling for me. I'm downstairs, watching TV. And so the guy, the scout's on the phone. She probably puts the phone down, and she's yelling for me. And there's commotion going on at the house, because there's always people there. And I pick up the phone. I'm like, hello. And he's like, it was hard to hear. And I'm like, sorry, who's this? And he's like, John Gill from Pittsburgh Penguins. And I'm like, hey, how are you? And then I think you got Craig Patrick on the line, and that's all I remember was, you've been drafted, and we'll be in touch.
Very cool. Yeah. Dream come true.
Dream come true, but just very surreal and very kind of like, all right, now what?
Yeah.
And, it was like I went on and I had a baseball game later that day or something. So
no beer parties to celebrate?
No celebration. It was just like, okay, I got drafted, but, I'm still going to the U of M, and I'm going to have to prove myself. Go through that. And then, but at the time, you didn't really, looking back at it now, it's just such a big ordeal. It's on TV and guys are there, and it's just a different time.
Yeah, definitely different time. So speaking of different time, we want to talk about your career, but for right now, just wondering if you get to see any of the Wild games, and if you do, what do you notice that the biggest difference is between when you played and when you see guys play now?
I would say, obviously, so much more emphasis on skating. The game is so fast right now. You know, when they took out the rules of clutching and grabbing, I tell guys, and they laugh when I tell them that you used to be able to dump the puck in, and the defenseman on the other team could like ride you out to the boards and put your stick between your legs and kind of corkscrew you. Yeah. And it was like you had to fight through that to get around him, and because he was buying time for the other D to go back and get the puck. So that was like expected. Like you dump the puck in, that D man's gonna like get in front of you and gonna try to corkscrew you, and you had to fight to get around him. And, you know, nowadays, obviously, it's a penalty if you do something like that. And so just emphasis on skating. The facilities are so much more these days. Like my Pee Wee team was over at the practice rink over the Tria just a couple of weeks ago for a tournament. And they gave us a tour of the facilities. And, you know, you've got the players' lounge, and you've got the training room, and you got the weight room, and they've got a cold tub and a hot tub and a sauna, and they've got, you know, guys that make them meals when they get in the morning. So if you can get in there, you want an omelet or you want a protein shake. We didn't have any of that stuff. And it was usually a bag of bagels or it was a bag of donuts. You get to pick one when you got there.
Which carb do you want?
That's right. That was it. Yep.
Oh, man.
You're going to take a quick minute to shout out some sponsors. State Farm Insurance for all your family's insurance needs. See Ryan Flagg at State Farm Insurance in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Ryan has been a proud backer of the hockey community for decades and continues to play the game himself. And Kelly Heating and Electric, dedicated to serving their customers' heating and electrical needs efficiently. They have been named one of Bryant's Medal of Excellence winners. They provide expert advice from a friendly staff that can provide you with the knowledge you need to make the best decisions on your next electrical, heating, or air conditioning project.
You started your pro career with the Cleveland Lumberjacks AHL. You finally make the squad with the Pittsburgh Penguins, 1995. You're in the locker room. You're looking at Lemieux and Jagr and all these guys. Tell us that experience. What's going through your head?
Just kind of like I didn't want to take things for granted. I want to soak everything in. You know, I had a funny story. You know, here I am playing on a team with Lemieux, and when he was either a rookie or a second-year player, I had a good friend of mine, Dan Lee, who his dad was the timekeeper at the old Met Center. So my buddy always had tickets to the North Star games, and he knew that I was a big Penguin fan and a big Mario fan. I was a Mario fan before I was a Penguins fan, right? Growing up. So I had the poster of Mario in the room when I was, you know, probably like in 6th, 7th grade, and he was probably 18 or 19 at the time. He's in the league and he's tearing it up and he's putting up points, and he became my favorite player. And so my buddy got tickets to the game. So we go to the Penguins North Star game back in, I can't remember what year it was, but I just know it was one of Mario's first years in the league. And so he had that very strong French accent, you know. And so my buddy's dad said, "Hey, you want to meet him?" And I'm like, "Do I want to meet him?" Yeah. So he said, "Well, after the game, I'll try to see if we can get in the room and you can say hi to him." Wow. So sure enough, we hung out and waited for, it seemed like forever. And he finally comes and he says, "Hey, you can come on the locker room." So we go in the locker room, and we had to go to the back where the training table was, and there's Mario on the training table. He's got like 2 big ice bags on his thighs. And my buddy's dad brought us over and he said, "Hey, Mario, I want to introduce you to some guys." And so we had our paper and pen and wanted to get an autograph. And he says, "Well, what's your name?" And I said, "I'm Joe." And he said, "Okay." So he signs it, gives me it. We talked for like 10 seconds, you know, and I was just in awe, like, you know, here he is. So now we're leaving and we're walking, and I got this sheet. I get in my buddy's car and I read it, and it said, "To Gilles," like Gilles Meloche, Gilles. Oh, remember Gilles Meloche, the goalie? He thought I said Jill, and I was not Joe, it's Jill. So, and I still have that autograph at my mom and dad's house in Northeast Minneapolis. And I told Mario that story once.
I was going to ask you.
We were on a bus, and I said, "Hey," you know, his name was Ace. I said, "Hey, Ace, you know, I met you when I was like in 7th grade, and you were like first, second year pro, and you wrote to Jill, best wishes, Mario Lemieux." And I said, you thought I was, Jill, not Joe, but it was the French language deal accent. And
Oh my gosh.
he got a chuckle out of it. But what a great guy, and what a classy, just such skill involved in his game. Like, for a big man, his reach. I would tell guys, he would scare defensemen on the other team. Like, if they went at him, he would burn them with stick handling or reach or whatever. And if you stayed back, he would pick you apart and sauce the puck like through your legs, or right on your backside there, and somebody would have a backdoor tap in. Just his vision and his ability. I mean, I can argue he's top 2 or 3 players of all time, right? He had some issues, injuries, his back and cancer, what have you, but man, he could play. And I was thinking that on the way over that you guys might ask some questions about, some of the guys I played with. My rookie year, we had Mario, we had Jagr, we had Ron Francis, who's I think top 5 in points all time. Tom Barrasso's in the Hall of Fame. We had Sergei Zubov on that team, Peter Nedved, Brian Smolinski. Our team was just stacked. And so we lost that my first year, we lost to Florida Panthers in Game 7 at Pittsburgh. And if you rewound it to Game 6, we were down in Florida, and I remember I got my first and only playoff goal. I was out there, took a penalty. I slashed a guy, or took a dumb penalty, and was in the penalty box, and I'm looking over at the bench to see where I should go after the penalty, and they're like, "Yeah, come to the bench," and so
You're going to sit for a while.
So yeah, and so the door opens and I hop on the ice. Well, we're coming up the ice on like a 3-on-2, so I'm like, I'm going to the net.
Absolutely.
And I go to the net, and the puck went back to the D. He shot it. I tipped it. And we scored to go up 2-1 against Florida. Now we're up 2-1 going into the third period. So if that goal stands, I get the game-winning goal to go to the Stanley Cup. We end up losing that game 3-2. We go back to Pittsburgh Game 7. We lost 3-1. They had an empty net goal, and it was one of those that our team was just a way more skilled team. But hats off to Florida back then. They were gritty. They were resilient. They were all bought in, but we had the better team, and I think they would tell you we had the better team. And that was the year they went on to get swept by Colorado. So it would have been a great Stanley Cup that year. It would have been Pittsburgh and Colorado. They had Forsberg. They had Sakic. They had, their team was stacked.
Patrick Waugh playing goal.
Patrick Waugh was in goal. Yeah. Rob Blake was on D. They were just a stacked team, and it never happened.
So do you have any other locker room stories you can share for us? Any little tidbits?
Well, we talked about Tom Barrasso, and he just got inducted to the Hall of Fame, so congrats to Tom. And he was a different guy. He's a goalie, right? So if you could say goalies, everybody in hockey knows the goalies are just a different bird. And he was real particular about his equipment and real particular about practice. He didn't like when guys would shoot high at him in practice. And if you shot one that maybe went off his shoulder, you were going to hear the F-bombs coming, and you're might have a stick flying your way. And that was just Tommy, and he was one of the highest paid guys in the league at the time, and he let you know it too. And but we had a story once where we were in Pittsburgh, was in the playoffs for football, and there was a football in the locker room, and guys were throwing it around, and he had this routine where he'd set up his gear, and he couldn't touch his gear, his pads and his blocker and his glove and his helmet would all be stacked in front of his stall. And those were off limits. If anybody touched it, he would lose his mind. So I'm playing football with like Peter Nedved or Jagr. When the Europeans throw a football, it doesn't look like Kirk Cousins throwing a football. So they'd throw it to you, and the ball would be spinning like the wrong way, whatever. And so one time Peter Nedved got it, and he threw it, and it hit Tom's little pad setup, and it just everything kind of fell apart. And he snapped, and he grabbed the ball, and he threw it down the hallway, and he says, "Get that damn thing out of here! Don't ever touch my stuff again. I'm gonna kill you guys." And we're like, "Okay, game's over." But I mean, yeah.
Quite the character.
So then, hey, real quick, I was in Buffalo at the auditorium, the old stadium there, and it was my rookie year, and we're doing a warm up before the game, and we're doing like the half moon where a player would throw the puck out to a guy in the half moon, you catch it, you shoot it, then you go skate a couple laps in the neutral zone. Well, I did that, and when I caught the puck and I went to shoot it, the puck flipped up on end, and it fired a rifled one right off his forehead, and it went up in the stands maybe 15, 20 rows. And I could hear him with the warm-up music and everything. You're dead. He dropped a couple F-bombs at me, and I'm like, oh. And all the boys looked over at me. And I like, put my head down and skated around a couple times. And then I get into the locker room, and he comes over, and he just gives me like a heart punch. And he's don't ever do that again.
It's not like you tried.
Yeah, puck flipped up. What do you do?
What if that happened in a game, Tom? You going to yell at that guy, too?
Exactly.
Oh, he was passionate about that, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
We talked about briefly, you said, Mario Lemieux, arguably one of the top players that have ever played the game. If you could pick the top 4 players, in any era, who would those 4 be in your mind?
Well, I would put Mario right there. You'd have to put Wayne Gretzky there. I'd put Bobby Orr. Those 3, I think, are locks. And the next 2 could be, if you had to pick just 5, I'd say Lemieux, Gretzky, or it'd be tough to leave off somebody like, Jagr could be in that mix. You got guys like, man, there's so many. It's hard to.
Gordie Howe.
Gordie Howe has got to be. I mean, that guy. You see the forums, that guy. Man, he was a legend.
Throwing cement
Gordy's
bags around
got.
as a
Yeah,
teenager.
and there's guys that it's kind of you seem to appreciate the guys you played against that are in your era more than even like obviously today's group with the Crosbys or the McKinnons and the McDavids. Obviously, they're still writing their history as far as are they going to get Stanley Cups? Are they going to win MVPs and scoring titles? But I think everybody would say those 4 we just mentioned would be on a lot of people's list.
I think so too.
And then if you threw in one of the players that are still playing, if it's Crosby, if it's Ovechkin, you couldn't go wrong with one of those guys.
Yeah.
You had a nice career with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and then you're with Cleveland, and then Springfield in the AHL. You go to the Coyotes, and unfortunately that was short, and it was ended because of an eye injury. We talked a little bit about it before the mics were turned on, but tell our listeners what happened.
Yeah, I was playing in Phoenix's minor league team in Springfield, Mass, which is the AHL, and we were playing a road game in Syracuse, New York, and just part of the game, I remember it was a physical game, and there was an altercation, and next thing you know, I'm in a fight with this guy, and we square up, and when he went to grab on, his thumb went directly into my right eye, and at the time, I thought he just landed a quick punch. I didn't see it, and he hit me, and I couldn't see out of the eye, and I knew I was in trouble, so I just kind of seatbelted and waited for the refs to come in, and he did, and he looked at me and he says, "Hey, bud, you better go get checked out in the locker room."
Were you bleeding, Joe?
No, it wasn't bleeding, but it was just like swelled shut.
Looked wrong.
It just looked wrong.
Okay.
And it's just, I couldn't open my eye, really. It was just I felt like a knife went right in there, to be honest. So I went over, and then we saw some doctors at the rink, and they said, "Well, we're going to send you to the hospital." So I go to the hospital in Syracuse, New York. They check it out, and they said, "Well, we're just going to let you rest here overnight, and you can go back. We'll send you back to Springfield the next day." I get to Springfield, saw some doctors there, and they said, "Well, just going to rest, and we'll see how it plays out." They didn't think they saw any damage. About 2-3 weeks go by, and they said, "Hey, my vision came back," because I had lost vision for a couple of days. I couldn't see, and it slowly came back. So that was a scary time, just because you didn't really know how serious it was. Is it something that's going to come back, or am I going to, have eye issues the rest of my life? So 2-3 weeks go by, things started getting better. I started to be able to see again, and the doctors gave me the green light to go play. So I finished that season, and it wasn't until that summer when I was playing tennis with a buddy of mine, and I noticed that when the ball would come over to the net, I would go to hit it, and I'd miss the ball. And I kept thinking, like, geez, I'm not that bad a tennis player. I should be able to hit that ball. Might have had 1 or 2 beers that night before, but I shouldn't be that bad. And I just noticed, like, during things later that week there, I'd go to reach for something, and I'd kind of like knock it over. I'd miss it. And it turns out that I had a torn retina, and my retina collapsed. So the bottom half of my retina would collapse, and that's why I was misjudging things. My good eye was trying to compensate. And so I go see one doctor. He sends me to another doctor, and I get to a specialist, and they said, "We got to have surgery, like, right now." And, you hear that, you're like, "What do you mean, right now?" "Yeah, right now." and they go in there and put it's called a scleral buckle. It's like a belt that holds your eye together and holds it in place. And it said, after that, it probably going and checking guys and getting punched in the face, probably not in your cards. So that was kind of the end of my hockey at that time. And it was kind of I'll be honest, it was like a little bit of a depressing moment of my life where I just like, man, I wanted to keep playing. I knew there was going to be some other opportunities with some expansion teams, Columbus and Atlanta and whoever the other teams, Minnesota was another one coming into the league that year. And so, it was hard to accept that this was it. It's all over. And then I had to kind of figure out, what next? What am I going to do now?
How would you classify your role when you were playing for Phoenix and for Pittsburgh? What was your role as a player on those teams?
It was to be a aggressive forward, to be a guy that's going to forecheck and create space and play the body. When I was in Pittsburgh, especially, they had such high-end talent up front, scorers that were, Hall of Fame scorers, that they needed guys to be physical and do the dirty work, get pucks out, get pucks in, block shots, mix it up in a fight once in a while, but just be aggressive and play hard, be hard to play against.
Is there any truth to the rumor that when Jagr came into the league, he was his English was not good, and that he was told that if he ever needed help, to call 911, and he's in the hotel room figuring he needs room service, so he dials 911 because that's the help he needs?
I think I might have heard something similar to that before.
I've never heard that before.
But he was
That's great.
he was such a character guy that me and him are the same age, so and he's still playing.
Yes,
right,
he is.
right now in Czech, crazy. But he, because we're the same age, we kind of hit it off and became buddies, and we would do things off ice. I remember one time he invited me. He was talking about how good a basketball player he was, and he was talking up like, he's watching NBA and like, how come their free throw percentage is not better than it is? And I'm like, what do you mean? These guys are NBA players. They're pretty good. And so one day I go over to his house, and he's got like this cheap plastic basketball set up where the rim is loose. So everything you threw up at the rim, if it hit the rim, it was probably going to fall in. So he didn't know that you needed to have like a hard rim and like a real setup. So I go over there, I go, well, yeah, because you got to fix your rim, man. Everything you throw up there falls in. And the other thing he didn't know, because he never really played one-on-one before, is because he was very competitive. He wanted to win at everything he did. So we're playing one-on-one, and he would shoot baskets like old school guys where they would shoot from down here like this. And so when you're playing, I'm blocking every shot. He's like, you're in my way. I'm like, well, yeah, I'm playing D. I said, yeah,
in my way.
You got to shoot from up here, bud. You got to shoot here. And he had stuff and everything.
That's awesome.
He didn't know. He's like, I'm like, but I wasn't a basketball player, but I played enough growing up that you got to shoot the ball from up here. If you shoot from here, I'm going to block every shot. So, he was. And then I remember one time too. We had a playoff series in Philadelphia, and it was an off day, and I think the 76ers had a game. So we met at the rink just to have a meeting, like a chalk talk type of deal. And after the meeting, we had some time, so we grabbed a couple basketballs, went up and started shooting hoops. And some of these guys, like the European guys that never really played, they didn't really know how to shoot the ball. And I'm shooting threes and I'm making them, and they're wanting to bet. I'm like, all right, I'll bet. Yeah, let's go. And they were throwing air balls and just bricks up there, and they're like, man, you should have played basketball. And I'm like, well, you guys are, way better with the puck.
So, there you go.
There you go.
Oh, that's great.
So, Joe, since your career ended, you've been involved in coaching with the Upper Midwest High School Elite League a couple of years at St. Paul Academy. You're on the Dusty Tuuks AAA program, as well as JD Hockey, which is a skills training program for young players. And you've been the head coach of the Minneapolis High School Co-op hockey team since 2011. Holy cow. What drives you to stay so involved with the game?
I think it's just to have passion for the game. I love being at the rink. I love being on the ice, teaching guys, mentoring guys, trying to pass on things that I learned when in my time. And I get satisfaction out of just working with kids and helping them reach their goals. And I think that's part of what drives me is showing kids, hey, I was just like you back in the day. And, if I can do it and come out of Minneapolis, Northeast Minneapolis, and go on to play pro hockey, there's something that you should strive to try to do, whether it's hockey or something else. But I always thought that, if I could do it, then I'm going to try and help somebody else do it.
That's awesome. So give us a little insight on where the name Dusty Tuuks came from.
Yeah. So it's funny because AAA hockey, like all these teams that are out there are always trying to one up and be like, we're the world selects, or we're the elite this and we're the elite all-star pro warriors, whatever it is. And I always kind of like the Bad News Bears approach where, we're going to try to compete and be good, but we're not going to toot our own horn and pretend how good we are. And then it has a double meaning because I have a warehouse in New Brighton where I've got synthetic ice and I train guys. And if you've ever skated on synthetic ice, it's pretty good. They've come a long way since I've tried it my first time in college, and I felt like I was in quicksand. I wasn't going anywhere. But the stuff they have now, it's pretty good. And so when you skate on the synthetic ice, you get like a dusty residue that sticks onto your skates. And so Dusty Tuuks was something that just kind of fit right in. And then with that, I started these AAA teams. And so there you go.
That is a really cool name too.
Yeah.
Dusty
I like
Tuuks.
that. Yeah. It's unique.
It's unique.
Did you think of that all on your own?
I did. And it was something that I'm like, well, what else could we do that's different? And I said, well, let's let players, instead of putting your last name on the back of your jersey, you get to pick your favorite NHL player. So guys will be, Patrick Kane, or they'll be Kaprizov, and they'll wear that as their part of their game. Now, it turns some heads when we go to some tournaments, and people are like, does Ovechkin's kid out there?
That's awesome.
Wait,
that's him.
That's Crosby's kids here? What?
Where do you get all these guys?
Was it an all-star team? And that happened a few times where people because they wouldn't know that I was the coach, and I'm watching warm-ups, and they're like, hey, did you see they got a Parisi on their team? And it's like,
you're just dying laughing inside.
Boy, you're a hell of a recruiter.
I guess. Get some big names.
Oh, we're going to give a quick...
Are they
go
onto you
ahead.
What's
now?
that? Oh, yeah, they're on to now. But I tell you what, it's
That's Joe's guys.
It's just a fun deal, and it's like meant to be like, because I think in today's game a little bit, or it's just in the sign of the times of about self-promotion, and guys are trying to get noticed or recruited, and it's like, you know what, if you're good enough, you'll get there. But right now, let's just have some fun with it.
Oh, very
so.
cool.
Quick shout out to Riverside Bike and Skate, Eau Claire's hockey headquarters, which is the oldest hockey store in the state of Wisconsin. Buy hockey gear from the people that play and know the game. And don't forget about their bicycle sales and service, as well as your paddle sports center for kayaks and canoes. Pat's been doing a good job of keeping Mogi and I in the game in our 60s here, so we rely on him for a lot of our gear.
Thank you, Pat.
And then we got Hertel Law, the law firm you want on your side, focusing on criminal defense and personal injury. Harry Hertel has been obtaining results for clients in the Chippewa Valley since 1981. When you need legal help if injured or accused of a crime, call Harry Hertel at Hertel Law for a free in-person consultation.
So, Joe, how gratifying was it for you to have your high school team make the Class A Minnesota State High School Hockey Tournament in 2022? And before you talk about the gratification, can you tell our listeners, what is your team made up of? Where do the kids come from?
Yeah, so Minneapolis, back when I was there, I was at Minneapolis Edison, and we had 6 high schools that had teams. Not only did they have high school teams, they had feeder programs. So they had Squirts, Pee-wees, Bantams, and they had their own associations. Well, over time, more and more people, moved out of the city, and the people that are in the city now just aren't as involved in hockey. So Minneapolis is now co-op. All the schools form one team. Majority of our players are coming from Minneapolis Southwest and Minneapolis Washburn. We get a couple of kids from South. We get a couple of kids from Minneapolis Edison. We got one kid from North this year, and a kid from Roosevelt for the first time. I've been in Minneapolis 10 years. It's the first time we've had a Roosevelt High player play for me. And you think of the guys like Reed Larson, you think of Mike Ramsey, and some of these guys that came out of Roosevelt back in the day, and to only have one player in our program over 10 years is kind of mind-blowing. But
it's the start of things to come. Who
yeah,
knows?
I mean, it was a very satisfying, kind of like it was, all the work that we put in to kind of change the culture, change the just the way we operate, the mindset of the kids and the program to believe that, hey, we're gonna be a class act. We're gonna be a competitive team, a team that's hard to play against, a team that takes pride in the way we look and the way we conduct ourselves and the way we leave the locker room. All those little things that I think go a long way to forming a good culture for a high school team. And those are things that we tried to focus on. And we got lucky. We had some good players that had some talent, and had a super fun year. And hopefully we can do that again this year.
Good luck.
Thanks.
We've mentioned Reed Larson a couple of times. Reed's a former guest on our podcast, former captain of the Red Wings, known to have the fiercest shot in the NHL. He talked about Gordie Howe and Gordie's elbows.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we ran into you at his book signing, and you had some of your hockey team players there for the Reed Larson book signing. Give our listeners a little history of that and why you did that.
Well, number one, Reed's a great guy, and I've known him for a while, and he's always treated me awesome. He's invited me to go on some trips with some NHL alumni teams, and I've done that a couple of times with him. So just a great guy, and I've had a lot of respect, and I knew about him, and then once I got to know him, I thought he was even a great guy, and so when I got to Minneapolis, we didn't have any awards that were named after anybody. So I started this thing where the team MVP is going to be the Reed Larson Award, and then the hardest working award is going to go to hardest working player is going to be like somebody like Rick Erdahl, who was at Washburn High back in the day. And then you had Mike Ramsey. I think the Mike Ramsey was like the most unselfish player award. And so I started naming and trying to get some connection to the former greats of Minneapolis hockey, and give them some connection to the players that I have now. And so when Reed was having his book signing, I brought our captains and a couple of the players over just to meet him, because they only knew about him because of he's the MVP award winner, named after him. And I said, you guys got to come over and meet him and see what a great guy he is. And I thought it was cool for the guys to finally connect a name with a face, and again, a guy that came out of the Roosevelt area and that park that he grew up. What was the name of that park?
I think it was Sibley.
Sibley Park.
Sibley Park. Yep.
And just made a heck of a career being a hockey player, and still I call Reed a good friend of mine, and if I ever need something, he's there to help out.
I just thought when I saw that you were there with those kids, I thought, what a great thing for you to think of, to bring those kids there. Hey, here's a guy came out of Minneapolis just like you did,
you guys, yep.
And here are all you guys. So there's nothing stopping you. You could possibly be that next guy. So what a great motivational tool.
Yeah, it was a great motivation today, and they liked it. They appreciated what he had. Gave the stories about some of the things that he did, and now they can connect that. They got a connection to that guy, and I think it meant something to him.
Yeah, good.
As a coach, are you seeing anything concerning as you get these kids from the youth levels up to your high school level that need to be worked on, that they should be more prepared for as they get into the high school level?
Yeah, I think, the easiest answer would probably be the physicality of the sport. Like we were talking earlier about how, in my era, it seemed like more kids were playing other sports, football in the fall. You play baseball or golf or something in the summer and spring. And I think it's easy for me to tell if I've got a football player on the ice, somebody that engages in contacts, not afraid to get to the hard areas, not afraid to bump a little bit. Whereas, the kids that are just playing hockey 24/7, never played football before, never been tackled. They just don't have that same at ease with the contact. It seems like they're a little bit timid, or they're a little bit nervous to get in those situations where they might get hit. And I tell them the best thing you can do is go out for football. And,
that's a tough on a high school kid, because it's physical in high school.
It is. And, but that was probably the biggest thing, is just the physicality of, when they're going to get hit, and then getting your head up. So hopefully you can avoid those hits.
Amen to that.
Yeah, no kidding. So you've been working with your youth kids. You've got the Dusty Tuuks. I can't get that out of my mind. That's such a cool name. And you're at the high school now, and have been for 10 years. Do you see yourself sticking at that level, or?
I don't know. As my kids get older now, I coach my kids' Pee Wee team in Roseville.
Nice.
I've got 2 daughters that play hockey. So, I'm juggling. I'd like to keep coaching and like to, that's to me, as someone that does hockey camps and hockey 3-on-3 leagues, and I do training, small group, and private lessons, and all these. There's a void if I don't have that high school competition. I think it kind of feeds that inner drive that I want to try to compete and try to get our team back to the state tournament. Whereas I still get satisfaction and all the feels for helping kids that on an individual or kids that are trying to get better, learn different power skating or shooting, whatever. But it's almost that team aspect of our high school team getting somewhere and having success is something that I think, I guess I didn't really think it was I needed that, but now that I'm in there, I kind of feel like I like it even more. And I think the kids on my team will tell you that I'm pretty passionate about doing things right, doing things, I got 2 rules. 1, be on time. 2, respect the program. And respect the program can go a lot of different ways.
Oh, yeah.
And so whether it's the way you dress, the way you behave, the way you conduct yourself, all those type of things, try not to draw any shade to Minneapolis. So if you're out there, I want you, representing us and making sure that you're doing us proud.
Yeah.
So your goalies during warm-ups and practice, do you let the guys shoot above their knees?
Chin music coming at you.
Little chin music, watch out. Well, it's funny because on my Pee Wee team, it seems like every kid wants to shoot the puck top shelf. And so here's the goal. I'm watching our warm-ups just the other day. Last week we were playing, and the warm-ups, every puck, about 4 of them hit him in the head. 4 of them are right by the neck. I'm like, guys, you don't have to kill our goalie before the game.
Yeah, if you kill him, guess who?
Yeah,
one of you guys
one
has
of you
to play
guys going
goalie.
in there.
So think about that.
Maybe that'll teach them.
You go.
Go in there and get a couple off the head, and then they'll figure it out.
Let you rifle a couple of bullets past their ears.
I don't know. That went off Barrasso's forehead. Went 20 rows deep. That might take that kid's head right off for crying out loud.
Let's go back to your pro career for a second. You're playing left wing. Who was on your line back in those days? And if you could change that line to have any other 2 line mates, who would they be?
Well, that's an easy one. I would get rid of the 2 guys. I had numerous guys, being usually a 3rd or 4th line guy. I was a bottom 6 player. So the names I could bring up, Glenn Murray or Brian Smolinski or Alex Hicks or Tyler Wright, any of these type of guys, I'd trade him in a second to play with Lemieux and Jagr. That means I'm on the first line.
Yeah, there you go.
That means I'm probably going to get some backdoor tap-ins from Mario. But seriously though, it was just a treat and I'm grateful to have that opportunity to play. And the older I get, the more I appreciate other guys that had roles. From my parents to my brothers and the coaches that I had, growing up. I had a guy, Bill Dupay, was my Bantam coach, and Chuck Ferraro was my Pee Wee coach, and I remember those guys for the rest of my life. Those were guys that had an impact on me. And funny story about my Bantam coach is Bill and this other guy, Dwayne. They would smoke heaters in the locker room between periods, before and after games. And it was just like nobody even thought twice about it. Yeah. And now
Crazy.
I just remember those guys sitting there, both of them would be smoking, and we're all just like,
Can't even breathe.
and nobody said anything. We just went along with it. But they were great guys and great coaches. And, again, I'm grateful for guys that had impact on me growing up and kind of helped shape me to who I am. And that's kind of what the gist of why I keep coaching and helping others is just to give back to the game and give back to guys that did the same to me when I was their age.
One of the recurring themes we hear in JC, I'm sure you'll agree with this, is how we never hear the word me from most of the guys that we interview. Mm-hmm. I didn't do this myself.
Right.
I had people reaching back and pulling me up and people pushing me from underneath, and it's just they're so grateful for all the people that had a part of their development.
Yeah, and if anybody says they did it on their own, they're lying. It's just not. There's a great NHL commercial where they do that same thing where they talk about all the guys. It was always we did this. We got to do this. We got to do this.
Yes.
And
yes.
You remember that commercial?
Yeah, I
it's
do.
Awesome.
Yep.
And it's one of my favorites. And usually they usually run it once in a while in the playoffs. And I think
it gives you goosebumps, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
I'm a young kid. I don't care what age. I'm mites, squirts, peewees, maybe even bantam age. I've got the opportunity to sit down with Joe Dziedzic. What advice are you going to give to that young kid who wants to be that grinder, that hockey player that you were?
You got to want it. You got to be willing to put the work in, to put time in. It doesn't always have to be structured. I tell guys all the time, like, do the free stuff. The free stuff is you stick handling on your own. It's you shooting pucks on your own without somebody telling you to do it. You have that drive to push yourself to see where this could take you. I don't know. I mean, but I think if you don't have that drive to do the extra work, do more than what's asked, I think that's maybe one of the secrets of success in any field. Really, do more than what's asked. If you kind of take on that mentality and you push yourself, then the sky's the limit, I guess. I've learned as I got older that certain kids that I didn't think have it ended up having it, and certain kids that I thought were can't miss missed. And sometimes it's a crapshoot. You don't know. I think guys will tell you that even with drafts, whether it's NFL or NHL, there's some first round guys that don't pan out. And there's some guys, remember Pavel Datsyuk, he was a mid-round draft. And, if that draft was restarted today, he'd be number one.
Oh boy, would he ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you never know. And I think that would be my main take-home message is like, hey, man, if you want to if you're willing to do it, the will's got to be greater than the skill. Yeah. And if you keep that mentality, you'll never know what could happen.
So as a coach, you're working with your kids. You tell them what you want to see in the off season. Some guys are doing it. Some guys aren't doing it. I get it. Kids are individuals. They're going to do what they feel is best for them. But when you get those kids with those differences on that team, you've got some kids that are just laying it on the line every night, and you have some other kids that I'm just here for fun. Yeah. How do you work with that as a coach? There's a great quote by
Nick Saban, Alabama coach. He talks about high achievers don't get along with guys that are, settle for mediocrity. The guys that just want to be average. The high achievers want guys to be like them and help them move on. I think if you get a few of those high achieving type kids that are driven, they can influence the rest of the team. And that's hopefully what your captains are doing is like pushing. I say, guys, if we're going to be good, it's got to be coming from you guys. It can't be coming from the coach. If you guys are leading yourselves, that's going to make our job as coaches a lot easier. And we're just going to have way more success if it's driven from the players and not from the coaches. And I think that's something that I try to tell my own kids. It's like, hey, it's got to come from you guys. It can't come from dad. I can't do it for you. You got to do it. And if you guys are willing to put the time in, the work, I don't even call it work. I just call it things that you have to do if you want to be a good player. And it's like, that's pretty much my message.
Awesome.
I got one last question for you, and it's a tough one. Have you ever had the situation of parental interaction we know that parents, the majority of parents think that their kid is the next Wayne Gretzky. And when you're dealing with that parent for whatever reason, how do you handle it?
It happens all the time. It's just one of those things where another coach told me this years ago that most parents are going to overestimate their son's talent by about 35%. And he said, some are 50%, some are 20, but the average is right around 35%. And he says, I try to be, one thing I like about Bill Guerin with the Wild is he's pretty honest and he's pretty, forthright to just tell you like, hey, we got to do this. We got to be better. That quote when he talked about Spurgeon, he said, it's about winning, and those type of things. So being honest with parents, and I just tell them, I said, we want your kid to be successful. We want your kid to be successful and to move on and play, but it's got to fit into our culture of what our team is trying to do. We're trying to compete, to get into our section, to get into the state tournament, and we're going to try and use your kid the best that we can to let our team have success. If our team has success, hopefully he'll have success too. But it's a dicey situation because every parent wants their kid to have success, but it can't happen for all of them, right? And It's sometimes it's just, you got to eat some humble pie, but you just got to like tell the parents like, hey, this is how we see your kid. And this is, we're trying to do this for him, but we're not trying to screw your kid. We're trying to help your kid, but I think sometimes that's the perception of some parents is they think the coach is out to get my kid. And, it's like, no, man,
why would you do that?
The coaches don't get into coaching to try to ruin players. They're trying to help you have success. They're trying to help you win. Coaches want to win. And the players, they have to respect that. And hopefully the parents do too.
Do you talk to your kids about roles? Here's what I see you. Here's what I need to see from you.
I'm starting to get there. Cause again, they're peewees and squirts.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to teach them the principles of, hard work and create some habits, right? Whether it's, things like make your bed to, put your dishes away when you're done eating to, look somebody in the eye and shake their hand and tell them thank you or whatever it is. Or tell the coach, if it's not me, to go up to them after practice and give them knucks and say thanks, and just teaching those little things. And as they get older, we'll start to tackle those other issues.
Okay.
Joe, been a blast.
Thanks, guys.
It's been fun. I would love to have seen what you could have done with your grit had that eye injury not occurred, because I have a feeling you got a few more years left in you.
Yeah, I have no regrets. I mean, hockey's given me a lot, and I'm super thankful for being involved in the game. The game's been great to me. So even though I had a eye-ending injury or a career-ending injury, I'm not bitter about it. I just accepted it and moved on.
Wow. And to the benefit of all these kids in Minneapolis and all the kids that you work with. So thank you for what you do.
Thanks, folks.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget to leave us a comment or a thumbs up, thumbs down. The more you got on our social media platforms, the better it is for Mogi and I to stay in the game.
Absolutely. And a huge thank you to our special guest, Joe Dziedzic. And thank you so much to our faithful listeners. Remember our sponsors for this podcast: Riverside Bike and Skate, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, Hertel Law, Kelly Heating and Electric, and Ryan Flagg at State Farm Insurance. As JC said, follow us on our social media platforms. And remember, folks, until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay on your inside edges.